most people can't do it. In fact, some would rather shock themselves than spend 10 minutes alone with their minds. But why is silence so uncomfortable? What are we really afraid of? In this video, we'll explore the psychology of silence from ancient philosophy to modern neuroscience. You'll discover why solitude feels like a threat, how buried emotions surface when the noise stops, and how thinkers like Blaise Pascal, Carl Jung, and Lao Tzu believed silence could lead to self-mastery, not fear. If you've ever felt uneasy in quiet moments, you're not alone. But what if silence isn't something to escape? What if it's the key to finally hearing your true self? The modern dilemma of silence. Let's start with a question. When was the last time you sat in pure silence? No phone, no music, no screens, just you and your thoughts. For many, silence is not relaxing, but unnerving. In a world designed for constant stimulation, stillness can feel like standing in the eye of a storm. The 17th century philosopher Blaise Pascal famously said, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." Over 350 years later, a 2014 University of Virginia study echoed his wisdom. Many participants preferred mild electric shocks over sitting alone with their thoughts for 10 minutes. But why does silence unsettle us? Part of the answer lies in our evolutionary history. Isolation once meant vulnerability. Silence in nature could precede danger. And though we no longer fear predators in the wild, our minds haven't caught up. Even more, we fear what silence might reveal. As Friedrich Nietzsche wrote, "If you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you." In silence, we face that abyss, our own minds. But maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what we need. The cognitive overload avoidance loop. Why do we avoid silence so intensely? Because when external noise fades, internal noise increases. The mind turns inward, often uncovering unresolved emotions, fragmented memories, or insecurities we'd rather ignore. This is connected to what neuroscience calls the default mode network, DMNP, a network activated during rest and introspection. It's the seat of self-referential thinking, which can be constructive or distressing. For those with anxiety or trauma, silence can feel like being trapped with an overactive narrator. Seneca, the Roman Stoic, warned we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. In silence, imagination runs wild, but unlike Stoic practitioners who trained the mind to remain calm and rational, modern people often try to escape introspection altogether. Michel de Montaigne observed, "A man who fears suffering is already suffering from what he fears." Avoiding silence becomes a self-reinforcing loop. Fear of what we'll think leads us to distract ourselves, which makes silence feel even more foreign and terrifying. But here's the twist. Silence, though uncomfortable at first, is not harmful. It's not a void, but a vessel. One that can hold our thoughts, process our emotions, and clarify our purpose. If we can learn to endure it, silence transforms from enemy to guide. Emotional suppression and the myth of control. Many fear silence because it forces them to face buried emotions. In stillness, the mental filters drop, and what rises can be uncomfortable. Grief, guilt, shame, or unresolved conflicts. Most of us suppress these emotions, believing we've avoided them. But suppression is not deletion, it's delay. Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." In silence, the unconscious speaks. We just usually don't want to listen. Silence strips away our distractions and coping mechanisms, challenging the illusion of control. We like to believe we're in charge of our emotions, but silence reveals otherwise. Emotional suppression only builds pressure, and avoiding silence is how we maintain the myth. Søren Kierkegaard described this internal confrontation as the sickness unto death, a despair born of not being willing to be oneself. When silence forces us to meet the parts of us we've denied, it's painful, but also necessary for healing. In truth, silence doesn't create discomfort, it reveals it. Facing our internal world isn't easy, but it's the first step toward integration. As Jung also said, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. Social identity and the externalized self. Why else does silence disturb us? Because it strips us of our roles. No one to perform for, no validation to receive. It's just us. And for many, that's a terrifying proposition. The philosopher Charles Horton coolly coined the term the looking glass self, referring to how we shape our identity based on how others see us. Silence removes that mirror. Without society's reflection, we're unsure who we are. Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist, said, "Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself." But how do we make ourselves if we've never learned to be alone? Our modern identities are so externally constructed that the inner self is often underdeveloped. Michel Foucault would argue that we are products of invisible social scripts. He said, where there is power, there is resistance. Silence is resistance. It disrupts the performance. And in that disruption, real selfhood can emerge, but the journey inward isn't easy. The silence asks, are you more than your job, your likes, your status? If we haven't cultivated an internal compass, this question can feel like an existential freefall. Yet silence gives us a chance to rebuild ourselves, not as others see us, but as we truly are, embracing silence as a path to growth. So how do we make peace with silence? First, accept that discomfort is not danger. Rumi, the Persian mystic poet, wrote, "The wound is the place where the light enters you. What silence reveals may hurt, but only to heal." Start with short daily sessions of quiet, 5 minutes, without distractions. Observe your thoughts without judgment. This is not about stopping thought, but witnessing it. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Silence helps you develop that mastery. Use tools like journaling, breathwork, or mindfulness to deepen your reflection. Gradually, the inner static quiets. You'll begin to see patterns, understand triggers, and develop clarity you never knew was there. Creative minds like Khalil Gibran believe in the power of solitude. In the silence of the heart, God speaks. Whether you're spiritual or not, there is something undeniably sacred about listening deeply to yourself. The ultimate lesson: silence isn't emptiness, it's awareness. And what we fear in silence is often what we most need to heal, grow, and understand. As Lao Tzu said, silence is a source of great strength. What once felt like a void can become your greatest teacher, if you're willing to listen.